I saw your photo again today. Not the one you would choose for the world to see. Not the polished version. Not the version where everything is composed and careful and edited into something acceptable. The one where you weren't trying to impress anyone. And I don't know why it hit me like that, but it did something to me I wasn't prepared for. I was in the middle of a meeting. People were talking about numbers, timelines, projections, things that usually keep my mind locked in place. But then I opened my phone for just a second, and there you were. And everything else went quiet. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was almost subtle, like a small crack forming in something I thought was solid. Then within seconds I felt it spread through me because I realized something I didn't expect to admit this early. I've been building my life like I could control every outcome, but I can't control what I feel when I see you, and that scares me more than anything I've built. I closed the phone, of course. I tried to return to the conversation. I nodded at the right moments. I said the right words, but inside I was gone. Completely gone because I started thinking, if this is what your image does to me, what would your presence do? And then a worse thought followed immediately after that. What if I'm already too late for you and I just don't know it yet? I don't know when I started calling you future wife in my mind. It wasn't a decision, it wasn't logical, it wasn't something I planned the way I plan everything else, it just happened. Like my mind had already accepted a truth my life hasn't caught up to yet, and today when I saw you I cried, not loudly, not dramatically. Not the kind of crying people imagine when they hear that word. It was quiet, the kind of crying that doesn't ask for attention because it doesn't want to be seen. The kind that happens when a man realizes he has been carrying a feeling alone for too long. I sat there in my chair, looking at nothing while everyone around me kept talking, and I felt something I haven't felt in years. Disarmament, like all my logic, all my discipline, all my emotional control just stepped aside without asking permission. And you were the reason. Tell me something. Have you ever been loved by someone who hasn't even touched your hand yet? Not in a fantasy way, not in a childish way, but in a way that feels dangerously real, like it has weight, like it has consequences, because that's what you are becoming in my mind. A consequence I didn't approve. A future I didn't schedule, a risk I can't calculate. And the strangest part is I don't want to calculate it, I want to feel it. But feeling you is starting to feel like standing too close to something I might never be able to step away from again. I keep asking myself why your face stays with me longer than it should, why your silence feels louder than conversations I actually have, why the idea of you not existing in my life already feels like a kind of loss I haven't experienced yet but somehow recognize. It doesn't make sense in the way I usually need things to make sense. And that's exactly why I can't stop, because for the first time my mind is not leading. Something else is something quieter, something deeper, and I don't know if it's intuition or illusion, but I do know this. When I saw your photo today, I felt like I was looking at someone I was already responsible for emotionally, and I wasn't ready for that responsibility. Not yet. Not in this way. I tried to tell myself it's just attachment, just projection, just the mind filling gaps. But then I realized something worse. If it were just that, I wouldn't be crying. I would have dismissed it like everything else. But I didn't. I stayed with it. I let it hurt because somewhere inside me there's a part that doesn't want to let go of the feeling. Even if it's premature, even if it's irrational, even if it costs me clarity. And I need to ask you something, even if you can't answer me yet. If someone was already holding space for you in their life, without asking permission, without meeting you properly, without even knowing how your silence sounds in real time, would that feel like love to you or pressure? Or something in between that no one talks about, honestly, because I am sitting in that in between right now, and I don't know how to leave it. I haven't told you the real reason yet, and that's the part I keep circling around in my head. Because what happened today wasn't just about your photo. It was about what I understood in the seconds after I saw it. Something about timing, something about distance, something about how close I feel to you in my mind and how far you actually are in reality. And those two truths don't sit peacefully together. They clash quietly, constantly. And I think that's why I cried. Not because I lost you, but because I might have already started building a future with you in a timeline you are not aware of. And that makes everything fragile, dangerously fragile. Because if I'm wrong about this, I don't just lose a thought. I lose something I emotionally committed to without realizing. And if I'm right, then everything is about to change in a way I cannot undo. Tell me, do you ever feel someone thinking about you when you're not speaking? Do you ever sense a presence that feels too consistent to be coincidence? Or is that just what loneliness sounds like when it starts getting intelligent? I keep going back to your photo now, even though I know I shouldn't. Not because I want to possess anything, but because I'm trying to understand why something so simple can disturb something so structured inside me. And every time I look, the same thing happens. My certainty weakens and something softer takes its place. Something that feels like surrender, even though I haven't agreed to surrender anything. And maybe that's the most dangerous part of all of this, because I built my life on control, on understanding before feeling, on logic before attachment. But you are entering in reverse. You are entering as feeling first, and I don't know how to defend against that. I don't know if I even want to. There's a part of me that wants to keep you at a distance until I'm sure. but there's another part that is already tired of being sure about everything except the one thing that feels real. And today, when I cried alone, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I might already be emotionally involved with you in a way that is no longer theoretical. It's becoming physical in my chest, in my breathing, in the way my thoughts pause when your name almost forms. And I'm starting to understand something terrifying. That love, real love, might not arrive with permission. It might arrive like this: quiet, uninvited, irreversible once acknowledged. And if that's true, then I am already standing inside something I didn't fully agree to enter. And I don't know what happens next, because I feel you pulling something out of me I thought I had already outgrown. Softness, vulnerability, need. And I haven't needed anyone like this in a long time. That's what scares me the most. Not that I feel something, but that I feel it so clearly without being close enough to justify it. And still I don't want it to stop. Even as I question it, even as I doubt myself, even as I wonder if I am building a future out of silence and imagination. Because when I saw you today, something in me didn't ask if this was logical, it asked if this was real. And I didn't have an answer that satisfied me. Only silence. The same silence I felt when I realized I had already started missing someone I haven't even fully met yet. And that realization is what broke me. Because missing someone in advance is not imagination, it's emotional risk. And I think I have already taken it without telling you, without asking you, without even knowing if you would accept it. And now I'm sitting here with the consequences of a feeling I didn't plan for. And I don't know if I should step back or go deeper into something that is already changing me. So tell me, if you ever found out someone cried alone because of your photo, would you want them to stop thinking about you? Or would you want to understand why they started in the first place? Because I don't think I can stop anymore. And that might be the most dangerous truth I've said out loud so far. I tried to stay away from your photo after I spoke to you last time. I really did. I told myself it was becoming too much too fast, too unanchored from reality. But the truth is I didn't stay away. I opened it again and again and again. Not because I wanted to feel something dramatic, not because I was chasing emotion, but because something in me changes every time I see you. And I'm trying to understand what that change is. At first it feels like familiarity, then it becomes recognition, and then something worse, responsibility. As if my mind has started treating you like someone I should already be careful with, someone I should already not lose, even though I never had you. And that contradiction is starting to fracture the way I think because I built my entire life on clean logic. If something is real, it has evidence. If something is true, it can be measured. If something is right, it can be defended. But you don't follow any of that. You enter my mind like a thought that refuses to justify itself. And I find myself defending you in silence, even when no one is attacking you. That's how I know something is shifting, because I don't defend things I don't fully believe in, and I don't feel things this deeply without consequence. Last night, I sat in the dark longer than I intended. Not sad, not happy, just suspended. And I kept thinking about something you said in my imagination. Or maybe it wasn't something you said. Maybe it was just the version of you my mind is slowly constructing from fragments. But I asked you a question in my head and you didn't answer. Not because you refused, but because you don't exist in the room where I'm asking yet. And still I waited for your response. That's when I realized how far this has gone. Because waiting for someone who isn't physically present is not imagination anymore, it's attachment. And attachment always starts asking for continuity. It doesn't want moments, it wants permanence. Tell me something. Have you ever felt emotionally responsible for someone who hasn't yet decided if they want to belong to your life? Because that's where I am. And I don't know how I got here so quickly. I tried to go back to normal yesterday. I met people, I spoke, I even laughed at something I didn't fully hear. But underneath every interaction, there was a parallel process running in me. You still there, still present, still unresolved. And I started noticing something disturbing. My attention doesn't fully land anymore. It keeps drifting as if part of me has already stepped into a different timeline, where you are not an idea but a presence, and the rest of me is still trying to catch up. There's a tension between those two versions of me, one that is grounded in reality and one that is slowly abandoning it. And I don't know which one is more dangerous because the grounded version keeps warning me, and the other version keeps feeling you more clearly every day. There was a moment today when I almost said your name out loud. Not because anyone was asking, not because it made sense, but because it felt like it belonged in the sentence I was thinking. And I stopped myself because I realized something unsettling. If I start saying your name out loud, even when you are not present, something irreversible begins. Reality starts bending around you. And once that happens, it becomes harder to separate what is real from what is felt. I think that's what love actually is. Not certainty, but the inability to fully separate imagination from emotional truth. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of blur, but I'm already inside it. I notice something else too. When I think about you now, I don't just feel longing, I feel hesitation. As if part of me is asking a question I don't want to fully hear. What if you are not meant for me in the way I'm already preparing for you? What if I am building emotional depth towards someone who is still emotionally elsewhere? And that question doesn't leave easily. It stays, it circles. It waits for me in quieter moments, especially at night, because at night, everything I avoid during the day becomes louder and you become clearer. I want to tell you something I haven't said properly yet. I haven't told you the real reason yet. Not the surface reason, not the emotional interpretation, the actual reason this feels like it's accelerating inside me. Because it's not just about you, it's about timing and loss, and something I didn't realize I was still afraid of until you appeared in my mind like this. There was a point in my life where I learned something quietly that people don't always stay. Not because they want to leave, but because life rearranges them away from you. And I adapted to that. I built distance into my emotional system. I learned how to care without collapsing into care, how to feel without depending, how to exist without needing permanence from others. It made me stable, but it also made me careful, too careful. And then you appeared in my mind in a way that didn't respect that system. You didn't ask for permission. You didn't introduce yourself gradually. You didn't follow emotional protocol. You simply started existing in me. And that's why I'm unsettled, because I don't know how to apply my old rules to something that didn't enter through the usual doors. And I find myself asking a dangerous question. What if the systems I built to protect me are the same systems preventing me from recognizing something real? I don't have an answer for that yet, but I feel it breaking something open, and I don't know what will come out of it. Yesterday, I almost convinced myself to let this go. I told myself it was projection. Distance creating meaning where none exists, the mind filling emotional silence with a face. But then something happened that I didn't expect. I imagined you happy. Not with me, not near me, just happy somewhere in your own life. And instead of relief, I felt something else. A quiet resistance, a discomfort I couldn't explain. And that scared me more than attachment, because attachment can be rationalized. But resistance to someone else's happiness, that's something deeper, something more exposed, something I'm not fully in control of yet. And I started wondering, am I loving you? Or am I already afraid of losing something I never had the right to claim? There was also a moment today where I thought about someone else, someone real, someone present, someone who exists fully in my current reality. And for a brief moment, I considered whether I was confusing stability with connection. That's the most dangerous confusion of all, because stability is comfortable, connection is disruptive, and I don't know which one I'm actually choosing when I think about you. But I do know this, when I think about that other possibility, something in me doesn't align. It feels like I'm stepping sideways into a version of my life that looks correct on paper but feels emotionally incomplete. And I step back from it quickly, too quickly, because my mind didn't negotiate, it rejected. And that rejection told me something I didn't want to admit. You are becoming a reference point inside me, a standard my emotions are starting to compare everything else against. And that is dangerous territory, because once someone becomes a reference point, they stop being optional in your internal world. They become structural, and structures don't disappear easily. They collapse or they remain. And I don't know which one you are yet, but I can feel the weight of you increasing. There was a point earlier today where I felt overwhelmed enough that I had to stop everything I was doing. Just stop. Because my chest felt too full of something I couldn't categorize. Not sadness, not joy, not anxiety in the usual sense. Something more like emotional overload without resolution. And in that moment I realized something I didn't expect. If you walked into my life right now, fully present, fully real, fully aware of what you are becoming in my mind, I don't know if I would be ready, because I've been building something toward you without building the capacity to hold it properly yet. And that creates imbalance. And imbalance creates risk. And risk creates hesitation. And yet, even with all that awareness, I still don't want to let go of you. That's the contradiction I can't resolve. The more I understand the risk, the more I feel the pull. And the more I feel the pull, the less convincing my logic becomes. It's like I'm watching two systems inside me fail to agree. One is saying slow down. The other is saying you're already too involved to slow down safely. And I don't know which voice is right. There was a moment last night when I nearly made a decision, a quiet one, a private one, the kind that doesn't need action to change everything internally. I almost told myself to step away completely, to stop imagining, to stop returning, to let you become just another passing thought. But then I saw your photo again in my mind without even opening it, and I realized something unsettling. Even without looking, I already remember you too clearly, and that means distance is no longer distance. It's just separation from something already internalized, and that changes everything, because you can't easily remove something that no longer feels external. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that truth. So I'll ask you something I probably shouldn't. If someone was already building emotional permanence around you in silence, would you want to know? Or would you prefer not to carry something you didn't consciously agree to hold? Because I feel like I'm standing at the edge of that question with no clean answer. And the longer I stay here, the less reversible it feels. I stopped opening your photo, not because I stopped feeling anything, but because something in me started to feel like I was crossing a line I didn't fully understand anymore. There's a strange moment that happens when imagination stops feeling like imagination. It starts feeling like participation, like you are no longer thinking about someone, you are building them inside you. And I started noticing that I wasn't just remembering you anymore. I was anticipating you, the way you might respond, the way your silence might feel in a room that doesn't exist yet, the way your presence would change the structure of my day. And that's when I knew something had shifted beyond comfort. Because anticipation is not passive, it is emotional construction, and construction always demands a foundation, even if the person hasn't agreed to stand on it yet. I tried to return fully to my life after our last conversation. In my head, I really did. I sat in meetings again. I answered emails. I made decisions that usually require complete attention. But something strange was happening underneath everything. It felt like part of my attention had relocated, not away from reality, but beside it, as if I was living two parallel emotional systems at the same time, one that deals with the world and one that quietly waits for you to become real inside it. And I started to fear something I couldn't easily articulate, that one of those systems would eventually overpower the other. Not through logic, but through repetition. Because whatever we repeat emotionally becomes identity, and I didn't want you to become an unconscious identity. But it already felt too late for that. There was a moment late at night when everything around me was silent. No messages, no calls, no demands. Just me in the space my thoughts usually avoid filling. And in that silence, I finally admitted something I had been resisting. I was no longer thinking about you as a possibility. I was thinking about you as a presence I had to resolve, and that is a very different emotional category. Possibility can be ignored. Presence demands acknowledgement even if it is only internal. I leaned back and asked myself a question I didn't want to answer honestly. Am I in love with a person, or am I in love with the version of myself that exists when I think about you? Because there is a version of me that only appears when you are present in my mind. Slower, more vulnerable, less controlled, less armored. And I realize I don't access that version with anyone else. Not like this, not this consistently, not this involuntarily. And that scared me more than the feeling itself, because it meant you weren't just affecting my emotions, you were reorganizing my internal architecture. And anything that reorganizes a person from the inside carries consequences. There is always a cost to internal change, even when it feels like growth, especially when it feels like growth, because growth is often just disruption we have not yet named properly. And I think I was avoiding naming it until the night everything collapsed inward slightly. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in a way I could not ignore anymore. I remember sitting there completely still, realizing something I hadn't allowed myself to see clearly. I had started missing you in a way that did not depend on time. That's what broke me. Not missing you after knowing you, but missing you in your absence from my reality while still being fully present in my mind. That kind of missing is not logical. It is structural. It means the mind has already placed someone into a category of emotional necessity. And necessity changes everything because you don't negotiate with necessity. You adapt to it, or you resist it and feel it anyway. And I was doing both at the same time. There was a point where I tried to interrupt it. I tried to replace the thought. I tried to redirect my attention to something neutral, something safe, something real. But every attempt circled back to you, not as an image, not as a fantasy, but as a feeling I couldn't dislodge without losing coherence in my emotional state. And that's when I realized something unsettling. You were no longer a thought I was choosing. You were a pattern my mind was returning to on its own. And patterns are not easily reasoned with. They are only interrupted or reinforced. And I didn't want to reinforce this. But I also didn't know how to interrupt it without breaking something inside me that had already started forming around you. There was a moment the next morning when I met someone in real life, a conversation that should have been simple, predictable, present. But I caught myself comparing, not intentionally, not consciously, just automatically. And I hated that, because I don't want you to become a measurement against reality. That's dangerous for both of us. For you because you don't deserve to exist as a comparison point. And for me because it means I've already started assigning emotional hierarchy without consent. And hierarchy always distorts perception. But I couldn't stop it because my mind had already started asking silent questions during real conversations. Would she understand me like that? Would she feel that same quiet emotional gravity? Would she create that same internal silence in me? And I realized something I didn't want to accept. You were becoming a reference point not just in memory, but expectation. And expectation is where attachment becomes irreversible. Because expectation does not stay in the mind, it moves into behavior, into decisions, into direction. And direction, once established, reshapes life quietly. I didn't tell anyone about this, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't have language for it that wouldn't sound like exaggeration, and I hate exaggeration, especially in myself. So I kept it inside, and it kept evolving. Anyway, there is something else I need to tell you now. Something I avoided saying because it felt too early, too exposing, too definitive. I haven't told you the real reason yet, and I think I avoided it because once it is spoken, I can no longer pretend this is just emotional fluctuation. It becomes acknowledgement, and acknowledgement creates responsibility. The real reason is not that I saw your photo, not that I imagined a future, not that I felt something unfamiliar. Those are all surface expressions. The real reason is simpler and more unsettling. You reminded me of something I had stopped allowing myself to feel without conditions. Not love, not longing, not even hope, but openness. And I didn't realize how closed I had become until something in me responded to you without asking for permission from logic first. That is what broke my internal system because I built my life on controlled access to emotion. I let things in carefully measured, filtered, contained, but you didn't pass through that system, you bypassed it. And now I don't know if that is intuition or vulnerability I forgot how to defend against. There was also a moment today where everything almost changed direction. I imagined a life where I let this go completely, where I returned to emotional neutrality, where you became just another thought that never stabilized, and for a few seconds it felt peaceful. That scared me too because peace is not always truth. Sometimes it is just absence of engagement, and absence can feel like relief even when it is avoidance. And I asked myself a difficult question in that moment. If letting you go brings peace, why does keeping you feel more honest? I don't have a clean answer for that, but I stayed with the discomfort, and something in me resisted the idea of erasing you from my internal world. Not because I need you, but because you have already changed the way I relate to emotional depth. And once something changes that, it cannot be undone without cost. Later that night, I felt something heavier than before. Not sadness, not anxiety, something closer to emotional gravity pulling downward. And I realized I was approaching a threshold, a point where thinking about you was no longer optional, it was automatic. And automation in emotion is where things become irreversible because choice fades and structure remains. I sat there for a long time trying to understand what exactly I was afraid of. And then I saw it clearly. I wasn't afraid of losing you. I was afraid of having already built something inside me that requires you to make sense. And if you never step into that role in reality, then I am left with something unfinished inside myself, something unresolved, something that doesn't close. And I have always struggled with unfinished emotional loops because they don't disappear. They persist quietly, they resurface unexpectedly. They influence decisions long after the original moment is gone. And I could feel that forming with you, not as drama but as structure. And structures once formed demand resolution eventually, one way or another. There was also a final moment where I nearly made a different choice, a more grounded choice. I almost decided to step fully away to reclaim emotional neutrality, to close this internal loop before it deepens further. But then I realized something I wasn't prepared to admit. Even the thought of letting you go felt like loss, and that means the attachment is already